Details of a strategic deal struck between China and the Cook Islands show that the tiny Pacific nation of 17,000 residents is moving closer to Beijing. And as New Zealand expressed concern over the agreements, China's military held live-fire drills for the first time in the Tasman Sea between New Zealand and Australia without notice. What strategic advantage does port access and seabed research in the Cook Islands give China, and why should Taipei, Canberra and Wellington be concerned? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Kavat. Joining us today are Liou To-hai, National Chengchi University College of International Affairs Adjunct Distinguished Professor, and Tony Hu, former US Department of Defense Senior Director for China, Taiwan and Mongolia. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
Let's first deal with China's 2 days of live-fire drills in the Tasman Sea, which disrupted 49 flights and were reported as the farthest south Beijing has conducted military exercises. A Reuters report examining satellite text messages between pilots and air control revealed that pilots were notified while already in the air on emergency radio channel, not through the usual notice to airmen. This forced planes to change their paths mid-flight while navigating a busy air corridor. However, an interview in the Australian Sunday Telegraph reveals that the Chinese ambassador personally notified Papua New Guinea's foreign minister of the drills 2 weeks in advance. Professor Liou, let me ask you first. So the Australian Defence Department said it only knew about these drills 40 minutes into the actual exercise. Why do you think PNG was notified 2 weeks in advance, but Australia, New Zealand left in the dark?
I think China did it deliberately because, Australia has been penetrated into China's territorial area several times without notifying China. So China did it in the same way. And in particular...
Let me bring Tony in. You want to respond to that, Tony?
Well, I think one thing needs to be clear. Australia never intruded into China's territory. The Australian presence in South China Sea has always been international waters based on international law. But obviously, China considered a portion of it. The small islands in South China Sea do not have, because it's a shore, even though it's man-made, it doesn't have the right of the 12 miles of territorial water. So when Australian aircraft slide around the area, it is not in any of China's territory space. So I believe really what China is trying to do is threefold. One is demonstrate to the world that their Navy is capable of long-distance sailing. It is truly becoming a blue water Navy. Second of all, as China's Navy expanded so quickly, most of its sailors are inexperienced. This type of long duration sailing allowed them to gain experience. So that's important. And of course, as the professor said, hey, you're at my front door, I'm gonna come to your front door.
So Professor, is it comparable though? Because, South China Sea, we could say it's disputed. Whereas, coming as far south as the Tasman Sea, what is the reason for that? Perhaps we should play a soundbite, a clip from Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles. Watch this.
The Chinese task group, as I'm advised, is complying with international law. And why that matters is because there's actually a greater frequency of Australian Navy vessels closer to China than there are Chinese vessels closer to Australia. And we rely heavily on our rights under international law to be there. And it matters that we're there because that's where our trade routes are.
What the minister there was saying was that the Australian presence is because of trade routes. So is there a Chinese trade route through the Tasman Sea?
Of course, China wants to become a global power. So that is why China wants to enhance its interactions with small islands. Why? Because they also classified as the One Belt, One Road routes, right? Another important thing, actually, what I did not mention previously, in a bigger sense, China is really eyeing the United States, all right? So that is why last time China tested its intermediate range missiles into the South Pacific, last year in November, and then followed by this time it's live fire drills. It's not only South Pacific, but also South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, 3 regions in less than two weeks at the same time. Why? Obviously, it's targeting the United States because so far U.S. President Trump has focused on Ukraine, Russia war, want to end the war and build a positive relationship with Beijing, eventually to come to this region. So for China, this is present a unique chance for China to show the world or to consolidate its position in Indo-Pacific.
Okay. Tony, let's move to the safety risks, though, of this particular live fire drill. So firstly, does Australia also hold live fire drills in the South China Sea?
No, Australia has not, but during large-scale exercises, there are live fires, and note them, as you mentioned, notice the airmen are issued usually a week or 10 days in advance, and certainly not like what China did. So usually, the exercise day and timing and closure area will be posted, and then each airport will have it posted. Any pilot that's flying through that area would know, okay, this is I need to replan my route, because most airlines, before you take off, the autopilot route is already planned out, okay? So in this case, Australia knew the Chinese ships were there, but they were surprised with the live fire because it was not, the presence of the ships in international waters, no big deal, okay? Live fire is a danger to commercial traffic, both air and sea. So in this case, Australia wasn't notified, the airlines that flying around the region wasn't notified, so that's very irresponsible. So that's the key. There are live fires during rim pack, for example, around Hawaii, big live fire, but notice is sent out weeks in advance.
Right. And it's also not close to China.
It's not close to China, and obviously we try to avoid that kind of provocation. There are live fire on the east side of Japan, for example. They're doing our northern edge and that type of exercise, but it's way out in the Pacific.
Right. Professor Liou, let me ask you, so what do you make of the two different approaches? You hinted about this sort of towards the Pacific Islands, this is China, versus towards US allies like New Zealand and Australia. Is China deliberately trying to divide the region? Is it deliberately trying to raise tensions?
I think it's multi-goals. All of you mentioned are relevant, right? So I think this is well-planned approach to show China's muscle in the region. And of course, China, is trying to drive a wedge between New Zealand and Cook Islands, even between New Zealand and Australia. They might work together. They might compromise with China in different ways. We don't know, but that's what China wants to play. And other states like PNG, if PNG did not inform Australia in advance, then Australia got very mad because Chinese ambassador already said, I told PNG in advance. So all are relevant.
But in that case, Professor, wouldn't PNG have assumed that the same notice was going to Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, so that is why whatever happened, if we are two friends and somebody told your friends, not you, you don't feel very good because this in our region is relevant to our relationship and the region.
So Tony, finally, we understand that, and the Australians have said it too, that China did not break any international laws. Does that mean that this behavior can simply continue?
That's the danger. No, they did not break any international law, but
we could also argue that they didn't give notice.
Right, they deviated from the norm, okay? The normal thing is you notify, because it's international waters, and
is mid-flight notice, though?
Right. The notice is for safety, mainly. It's not a legal requirement. And that's where the line is drawn. They have not violated any international law, but they have failed in their duty of making sure the safety of civil aviation, civil sea transportation, by having this thing without letting the pilots and ship captains know beforehand.
Okay. Now, Professor mentioned Cook Islands and New Zealand. Let's turn to that story now. So according to details released by Wellington, China and the Cook Islands have agreed to promote investment and cooperation in the blue economy, which encompasses marine activities that generate economic value, a maritime industry agreement, and a Chinese development aid grant worth $2.6 million were also signed. Other details indicate their new agreement includes preferential treatment at regional or multinational organizations, and this includes preliminary briefings. They say, quote, "We will engage in advanced discussions prior to the Cook Islands hosting of any regional meetings that China ordinarily attends in any capacity, such as the Pacific Islands Forum Leaders Meeting, to identify ways in which we can support each other." Taiwan has long been seen as a key partner, a regional partner within the Pacific Islands region. Why would this in particular be concerning for Taiwan if Cook Islands was working with China in these kinds of regional?
Because Pacific Island Forums consists of 18 members. We only have 3 allies there, Palau and the Vanuatu and the Marshall Islands. So last year there was a big fight. We sent our Deputy Foreign Minister Tian Zhongguang to lead a delegation there. All right, so that is what lowers the big fight from both sides, allies, to compete with each other. And this year, Solomon Island is going to host the PIF leaders meetings.
Right, which used to be a Taiwan ally is now a Chinese
diplomatic
ally.
In that case, all relevant to Taiwan. Maybe some report even suspect that Taiwan might not be able to send high-ranking officials to there.
And so what, Tony, I'll bring you in. So what's the goal there? What's the diplomatic goal by China?
Well, I think the main concern is Cook Island and New Zealand has an agreement where within the agreement it says, New Zealand's hoping that Cook Island will not pursue policy that significantly at variance to New Zealand's interest. And New Zealand handles Cook Islands defense and diplomacy, foreign affairs. So this certainly falls into foreign affairs. And the fact that China was able to get in there, do this, and have Cook Island keep it secret, confidential from New Zealand is a concern. And
why do you think they did that? Because they didn't want to have any obstruction before signing?
Exactly. It's like, it's better to say, oops, sorry, versus ask for permission. And this is not a good thing because if you look at the situation right now, Australia has signed a security agreement with Nauru. Will China do that with Nauru by cutting Australia out? And also, China has been, as the professor said, trying to expand its influence in that region that traditionally has been the domain of Australia and New Zealand. For example, in Tonga, right now, China has continued to provide Tonga money. So Tonga owes China $120 million, which is a quarter of the GDP. And right now, there are 4,000 Chinese already lived in Tonga, which altered the demographic composition of Tonga. So if this thing continues, the Chinese influence in South China, South Pacific is going to be basically overtake Australia and New Zealand. The strategic danger is that these islands are on the east side of Australia and New Zealand. If Australia or New Zealand wants to assist events in South China Sea or Taiwan, China can make it difficult where Australia have to leave some forces at home, worry about Chinese coming from the other side. So strategically, it's a very smart move on the Chinese part because they can just put some ships or a couple of submarines there where you'll tie down a huge portion of Australia and New Zealand's defense forces, worry about that. Even though places like Cook Islands doesn't have a large harbor or airfield to station troops, but it's a resupply point. It's a place where China can sustain their operation in the South Pacific by getting water, food, and things onto their ships so they can stay there a long time. So it's more important as a supply point than a possible military stationing island.
All right. And Professor?
I think China did this actually is relevant to New Zealand's foreign policy. Because New Zealand used to be a sort of the negative ally of the Five Eyes. But now New Zealand has become more active in that case. So it's not. Another important thing is news recently. I think this year New Zealand also sent its naval vessels to Taiwan Strait. So that is why China wants to teach a lesson to New Zealand. Okay, if you continue to do so, you know what happened. I can make friends with your association relationship friend.
So it is a threat. It's a warning. It's a threat.
There are other things we talk about, the mining or other things. I think that so far that is not the real meaning, but it's kind of covered intention. We need to find out.
Right.
It's all relevant to strategic implication.
Good, yeah, good point. And Tony, Cook Islands says its new relationship or upgraded relationship with China won't impact its ties with New Zealand and Australia. What's your view on that?
They can't help but impact their ties because now New Zealand obviously felt Cook Island didn't honor the agreement they had by doing this behind New Zealand's back. And then if China do deploy, the agreement involves exploration of possible minerals undersea.
Which we will come to.
Right, so if they want to do that, Chinese has to deploy a lot of survey ships, personnel, and into the region. And I think it is a concern because now Cook Island gets New Zealand passport, right? So what if the Chinese people start to settle in Cook Island and change the demographic just like in Tonga, okay? And soon they can drive political change. The type of political influence come from the presence. So I think...
So like a pro-China or even a sort of a puppet government.
Exactly, and things like this, Chinese think a long way off, 10 years. So this is the beginning, and soon they will start settle people there. That's what I can see, because they have been doing this in several other places like Tonga. So I think that's a concern.
The Cook Islands exclusive economic zone is among the largest in the world, covering 750,000 square miles of ocean. Its waters hold key mineral deposits containing manganese, cobalt, nickel and copper, essential for electric vehicles and advanced weapon systems alike. Now, Cook Islands government also announced a 5-year agreement with China to collaborate on exploration and research of the country's seabed resources. However, it said the Memorandum of Understanding did not grant China a mining license. Professor Liou, New Zealand is considering withdrawing its support, this is the latest news, for the international ban on deep-sea mining. So whilst they said that there was no mining license granted, does it appear to be heading in that direction?
Perhaps, but the thing is, China has already, driven the a wedge between New Zealand and Cook Island. New Zealand Prime Minister was very angry at Cook Island and said that this is a dispute between the two sides. So that could be his decision in order to prevent the Chinese interference. But of course, at the same time, he also sent the Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, to China to protest about what China did to them, and of course they perhaps seeking for compromise. In that case, because New Zealand's economy now is in trouble, New Zealand needs a lot of these kind of tourists and many other things, economic assistance. So China could drive a wedge between New Zealand and Cook Island, between Australia and New Zealand. It depends how New Zealand is going to respond. If they can respond in a smarter way, then okay. If not...
Tony, on that point, actually, on the economy, so isn't it also understandable that the Cook Islands would be keen for this economic gain from China? It's sitting on, what we said was a lot of critical minerals. The estimates place it at 6 to 10 billion tons, possibly the largest cobalt deposit in the world. So isn't this all entirely understandable? Is it against any sort of constitutional ties with New Zealand?
It is understandable. New Zealand does not consider Cook Island an independent nation, and it's been under New Zealand's protectorate for such a long time. Will China entice it to declare independence? Absolutely. New Zealand cannot compete with China as far as financial aids, economic incentives that China can provide to Cook Island. So unfortunately, I see this going where New Zealand is going to lose on this type of tug of war with China.
You said that Beijing always takes a long view. So is the long view essentially to entirely replace New Zealand?
Absolutely. Not only just Cook Island, in the entire South Pacific, I believe Beijing's objective is so that that entire region acquiesces to China's desire. So you already saw all these movements of stealing Taiwan's diplomatic allies and all that. I think if China wants to, they can certainly influence that. And so it is a long-range objective, I believe, China has to replace both New Zealand and Australia as a dominant power in the South Pacific. Actually, not just South Pacific, certainly Southeast Asia and most part of the Western Pacific. China would like to be the big dog in the region.
Right, okay. And Professor, let's move again to, so what does that mean for Taiwan?
Taiwan, we have to continue to play as what we are playing. We make friends with everybody because we don't have that kind of ambitious goals, to do everything there, to control the region. No, we just want to make friends. We just want to join the region. So I think we need to continue to do so. In that case, that will be in our favor because now everybody's concerned about China, and now we're still friendly to everybody and make friends with everybody on the mutual beneficial basis. This is very important.
And Professor, you mentioned that the critical minerals research agreement is essentially a cover or not that important. But do you think that there is value in that potential for China, given the competition for critical minerals, given their use in weapons and also, the Green Revolution? We know, of course, that the US is trying to get access to Ukraine's critical minerals.
Yeah, I think through the report that we just heard, I think could be relevant cobalt. The rest of critical minerals you can all available in Australia. Of course, there's some limitation from Australian government, but I think cobalt is the most important one. Why? Because the Republic of Congo, that region now is in warfare. So in that case, it's not good. It used to be dominated by China. Almost 60% of the exports from that country all gone to China. So that is why that could pose the danger for China. So that is why, in case China really can get cobalt from the Cook Island, that's a very very important for Chinese in terms of competition with the United States, because now U.S. is already looking for these critical minerals, in particular cobalt. Only few countries can have this.
Wow. Okay, very interesting. Tony, you wanted to jump in there?
Professor Liu is correct. Cobalt is a critical element for alloys that can handle high pressure, high temperature, like those in the jet engines. So if you want to have a jet engine that lasts a long time, you need cobalt, and that's what China needs also. Right now, the engines is only half as good as the Western engine because they don't have that technology and the alloy. And certainly now they have the ability to make this type of alloy. They need the material. They need cobalt. So cobalt is very important.
Right. Okay. And final words, Tony, since you've got the US background, how do you think, very briefly, how do you think the US is reading all this? Professor said is actually the US that this is all targeted at.
Of course, the U.S. has been counting on our close ally, Australia and New Zealand, to maintain stability in the South Pacific. United States have not actively involved ourselves in the South Pacific, but now it becomes a danger because South Pacific is just next to our critical military installation at Guam and in Hawaii. So this becomes a problem because it has extended beyond the first island chain. Okay, so I think that's how U.S. sees it, not only as an economic issue, but also a national security issue.
Okay, we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much, Liou To-hai and Tony Hu, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.